go down and race for a guy named Smokey Eunuch.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, that was quite a story. I was home after the season was over, and I got a phone call from a friend of mine in Dallas who was a Pontiac dealer, and he asked me, he said, "Do you think you'd like to run the Daytona 500?" I'm going to say no. Anyway, he said, "Well, come on over here," and I called this guy. He's building a new car, and he'd like to talk to you. So I went over there, and we talked about it, and then he called the guy and had him on the phone. He said, "Yeah, I've got him right here. Hang on." And he handed me the phone and said, "Here, talk to Smokey Eunuch." I nearly dropped the phone. And he said, "You want to come down here and run my car?" And I'm going to say no. Anyway, I said yes. He said, "When can you be here?" I'll be there tomorrow." So I took off and went to Daytona, and got there and got fitted in the car at his shop and everything. And it was the next day we went to the track and got unloaded in the garage, and he said, "You're going to need somebody to answer questions for you." He said, "I'll be right back." And he went away, came back in about 15 minutes with two guys with him, and said, "Here, meet Fireball Roberts and Joe Weatherly." And they were my tutors for my first Daytona 500. And anyway, little Joe was having trouble with his Ford, and so Fireball did help me quite a bit and told me about some certain things on the track. And anyway, I went out, and I had the strongest car, hot rod, in the garage area. Believe me, it was strong and fast. Went out, and we were running quick right away. And Daytona was not the most comfortable racetrack in the world to run, but still did. And Junior Johnson had a car with the same engine, and we were wrestling. And of course, he knew that Smokey had so many tricks up his sleeve. It wasn't anybody going to beat us. And we set a new track record, world record, qualifying, 160, listen to this one, 165.183 miles an hour. They warm up that fast. Different car. But anyway, got, set on the pole for the heat race, the qualifying race, and still had the fastest car in the garage, and won it. And became driver that had won the first race he ever ran in NASCAR.
Right.
And that helped me quite a bit when I wanted to come to Indy. And anyway, Smokey asked me later, he said, "Would you like to stay here and run with me?" And I said, "Smokey, I really want to go to Indianapolis." And he knew, because he was a big fan of this place.
Right.
He really,
when you read his bio, it's amazing how much of it's really devoted to Indianapolis.
Yeah, he liked the challenge of this place. And anyway, I had the opportunity to come here and took it, and really made Tom Shepard upset, because I left him twice. And I was leading the points in IMCA, and we had it won. And I took the ride in the dirt car at the Hoosier 100, and he didn't talk to me for a week anyway.
You come back to Indianapolis in '64, obviously a heartbreaking race. race. But I think in '64, are you paired with Herbie Horsepower, Herb Porter? Was he your mechanic in '64? Yeah.
Yes.
Another Kansas born guy, I might add, but another somewhat cantankerous guy, but a guy who can make a race car go fast. What was that like?
Yes, he did. He really make an engine work. And, yeah, that was, sad to lose those two drivers. Eddie Sachs was a dear friend. And anyway, it was, we took the green flag and Eddie was in the same row with me, and he pulled ahead, and I said, I'll follow Eddie. He knows how to get around here and maybe get to the front, so we'll see what's going on. And we went around, and Davey McDonald went by me at the end of the short chute, and his car was really yodeling, it was bouncing and even getting the left rear into the gravel and grass and everything in the inside, and went by, and I thought, well, he's either gonna win this thing or crash. And so we go down the back stretch, and I'm right on Eddie's bumper. We go around, and as we start across the short chute, I see this red car go sideways and over, and when he impacted that concrete wall that was angled out toward the track, it went off like a cannon, and he went across the track. I was right on Eddie's bumper, and we came up to that, and there was nowhere to go. We were committed to where the line we were running, and he, at the last instant, there was just a little bit of space between the tailpipes and the car that had crashed and the wall. Well, I headed for that the best I could, and Eddie impacted Davey, and his car revved up in the air, and he left a skid mark up the nose of my Watson Roadster about 3 feet long, and from his right rear, and I went over something and probably bounced off of the wall and came out on the other side, and my car, it had gasoline, burning gasoline. It had been rained all over it, and it was, I even looked down to undo the transmission lock, and the carpet had some flame on it. And Bobby Unser was behind Ronnie Newman, behind me. And Newman made it by on the inside, and Bobby hit him. And Bobby was driving the no-bot. He hit him and caught him on fire from rupturing his tail tank. And he came by, and his steering was knocked out on the no-bot. And as I'm reaching down to unlock the transmission and shift it first gear, I hear this engine screaming, and look around, and here comes Bobby, and he hits me in the left rear, slams me into the guardrail, this bang, and had the granny, we call him, that held me up in the seat, and he stretched it out over the tube of the frame. And anyway, went on around, and Bob Veith, Patty Veith came up beside me, and he's pointing because he could see the fuel running out of my car in the back. Bobby had ruptured my fuel tank where it mounted on that tube that ran through the thing. And anyway, came around, and I thought, well, maybe this thing is on fire and I don't know it. So I pulled in the grass, and there was a yellow shirt with a fifth helmet and a fire extinguisher, and I put it in neutral and motioned for him, and he leaned in. I said, "Is this thing burning?" And he looked at it, underneath it, around it. He said, "No." I just said, "Thank you," and I put it in the first gear and drove off. And crossed the short chute and into 4, and I rolled up there and stopped, and shut everything down, and got out of the car, and I could see there the fuel, and there was a couple of guys with fire extinguishers came over and stood by, and I started walking up toward the incident, and Don Branson stopped me, grabbed me by the arm, and says, "You don't want to go up there." I said, "Fine, Don," but my neck feels like I got some burn. I had some second degrees on the back of my neck from going through. And anyway, I went to the hospital and got my neck fixed and came back to the garage. And about the same time, the car got from the fuel jack to the ground, pushed it in, and Herb unhooked the hood latches, raised the hood, and looked inside, and there was a lot of pea gravel and sand looking stuff, and there was this lump that was covered up with sand, and he picked it up and cleaned it out. It had a shoestring that had been faced through it and tied. And Herb looked and said, "Wonder where this came from?" And somebody at the door said, "Oh my God." I said, "What?" He said, "That was around Eddie's neck." That's how close we got in there.
Yep.
But anyway, that was my second race.
Your second race, you're still relatively a newlywed. At some point after that, did you sit and think, do I want to do this? Did Betty look at you and say, do you want to do this? Is this the path you want to go on?
I wanted to be a racer.
Right. And she knew it. And she knew you wanted to be a racer.
Oh, sure. Yes, she knew that.
Yeah.
She had seen what went on at the hospital during the maze,
Right.
previous as a nurse. So, yeah, she was good.
She knew what made you take.
Yeah.
So 65, I brought this up.